going to wait a few seconds to let everybody in. Okay. Prynhawn, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all today as part of the South Wales Industry Cluster programme to a session that's primarily focused on local energy planning in South Wales. Some of you may know me already. My name is Roger Griffiths. I'm Head of Place and Sustainability at Carmarthenshire Council and your chair for this afternoon's session. A few housekeeping rules to start with. Please be aware that today's session is being recorded and your participation here is deemed as consent to do that. It's been recorded for purposes that we can track down the conversation and the discussion points that are being raised throughout the session. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Teams, probably a little bit over familiar with Teams in the last couple of years, but just to remind you that there is a chat facility in the sidebar that we will use for the Q&A at the end of the session. Please feel free to pose your questions through the session in the chat function, and I will do my best to canter through those at the end of the session. And just another housekeeping note, while speakers are presenting, if you can mute your mic and camera, please, I think that will be helpful so we don't get any background or feedback. So a little bit about the session then. As part of the drive to decarbonise the energy sector, with the support of the Welsh Government, the 4 regions of Wales have been taking a greater ownership of energy strategies relevant to their regions. The overall objective of the strategies is to deliver on the region's ambitions for decarbonising the energy systems in those areas. Each of the 4 regions continues to develop the governance structures, and I'm sure you're already familiar with the emerging corporate joint committee structures that are in place at the moment. And they will be producing regionally specific energy strategies. The regional strategies are area-wide, they're not around organisational limits, and they will cover multiple sectors. The success of the strategies is dependent on all actions taken by a range of actors and sectors across the regions. So I'm sure many of you have seen some of the stats that South Wales accounts for almost 75% of the total energy consumption in Wales. The C&I sector, which many of you are from, accounts for 68% of the energy demand in South West, considerably influenced by the large industrial energy consumers, and 34% of the southeast demand, and therefore it has a significant role to play in developing and implementing actions to support South Wales energy strategy priorities. It's important that the actions of different actors are aligned to support delivery of the energy strategic objectives, which is why local authorities have taken that strategic lead. Apart from supporting decarbonisation and decarbonisation targets, of course, there are significant economic opportunities for the region in developing strategies, including scoping and developing regional skills and supply chains, reducing energy demand and improving energy efficiency, realising the benefits from switching to alternative fuels such as hydrogen, the economic benefit from decarbonisation for supply chains and clusters, maximising the potential from new and nascent technologies, and taking a regional coordinated approach to investment and creation of the economies of scale. So events such as this and others that SWIC are leading on are important to develop a deeper understanding of the need for decarbonisation and raise awareness of potential economic opportunities. So I'm grateful for everybody for attending today's session. It's really useful to foster a collaborative approach to accelerate decarbonisation and tackle the causes of climate change. So this afternoon, we are going to hear from 4 speakers. Jane Forshaw from the Welsh Government Energy Service, who will give you an overview of regional local energy planning. Robert O'Dwyer, Head of Infrastructure from the Cardiff Capital Region. Rob Bassini, we're grateful to him for being here from the Federation of Small Businesses, who are going to give us a perspective on regional energy planning. And Stephen Jones, many of you know from Pembrokeshire Council, who's leading on the work for the development of the regional energy strategy on behalf of the 4 authorities that make up the Swansea-based city region. Following our speakers, there's going to be a short poll which Jane will lead on for attendees, and an opportunity then for questions ahead of closing at 3:30. We don't have a huge amount of time, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jane Forshaw from the Welsh Government Energy Service to set out what regional and local energy plans are. Jane, over to you.
Rodri, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for inviting me today. I've got just a few slides to pick up on where Rodri's started. Is that everybody seeing that? I can't see, so I'm just assuming you can. Thank you. So I'm one of the strategic leads with the Welsh Government Energy Service, and we've been supporting the regional energy planning that Rodri just described. Just a quick word about what we are, because we're very grateful to Welsh Government. We're running a 5-year programme to decarbonise the public sector and community enterprises. You may be aware that the public sector has got a target from Welsh Government to be net zero by 2030, and that's scary because that's only 2,900 days now. And we work across the spectrum in the public sector, including regional energy planning, investment programmes for energy efficiency, looking at generation opportunities for renewable energy, and looking at transitioning fleet and staff mileage. So we offer help both from a strategic perspective, but also technical and procurement and looking at commercial business cases. So we're here for the public and community sectors. You might have spotted this morning that Welsh Government have also launched the Net Sero Industry Wales body. So hopefully there might be a parallel support package for the business sector. Just a tiny piece here on the impact that we've had. So in the up to March last year, we've managed to get a total of over £100 million of investment across the public and community estate. And you can see that we've more than doubled that in terms of income and savings from projects. So bang for buck, really good to see. And we've also managed to get connected over 32 megawatts of power, and the results this year are even better. So in terms of impact and perhaps lessons to take into the business world, we can certainly see cost savings. What's great about working in Wales is the Welsh Government has got this huge mandate behind the net zero agenda. So with this strength of policy, we find that people can be confident about taking investment decisions on decarbonisation, and it means because of the ambitious targets, we can also look immediately at having pace and scale. So I think it's quite useful to see all the supporting legislation and ambitions in one place. So turning to the energy visions that we've just been introduced to, we've started this journey with all 4 growth deals across Wales, and of course people are going to end up with a decarbonisation plan, but as Rodri was saying, we're very keen to see the vision work as an enabler for a more resilient and self-sufficient regional economy, and certainly with increased pressure on energy supply chains, if we can get that resilience, then we become a much stronger proposition as a country and a set of regions, but also hopefully we'd attract inward investment. And we're very keen to stimulate and support SWIC in looking at innovation and looking at the wider benefits to the region. So things like supply chain opportunities, circular economy, and improving the skills base. So the energy visions, and you'll hear more detail shortly from our other speakers, but essentially we're looking at power, heat and transport systems across those regions. And our works provide a detailed energy and economic modelling to cover both where the opportunities are for energy generation and looking essentially at deep retrofit for commercial and domestic sectors and fuel switching, both for those sectors and transport. And a typical strategy would have a baseline, tends to be 2018, and we're looking at a 50% decarbonisation trajectory at least by 2035. And we've done some pathway modelling, so that allows us to see what the barriers and what the levers are to delivering the plan. And there's also a very detailed techno-economic analysis so that we can show that as a base case, as business as usual, if we actually take the investment that's being proposed, we'll actually improve GVA and return on investment. And each of the regions end up with a prioritised action plan that has had both economic and commercial deliverability criteria applied to it. So we've been working at the regional level, but also at the local level. So there's been an initiative that will spread across Wales called Local Area Energy Planning. So if you like, the overarching piece has told us what needs to happen, but the local area energy planning is where that should happen on the ground and by when. And obviously each of the authority districts in Wales, it has different geographic and locational factors. So this is to give a bespoke local action plan. And Welsh Government have kindly funded 2 pilots which are just coming to their end in Newport and Conway with interesting results. And UK Government has shown interest and funded a similar scheme for Pembrokeshire. And the rest of Wales will be supported with Welsh Government funding working through the growth deals starting next month. And essentially what we'll end up with from these local area energy plans is that bottom bullet point, a credible and investable plan, which hopefully in its creation has also engaged citizens and businesses so everybody can see what needs to happen. And this, I've just taken a slide from Newport here as an example to give you detail of the kind of data sets that we're gathering. So on the left there, you've got examples of car mileage and car ownership, which actually don't correlate. So where we've got high levels of car ownership, we haven't necessarily got high mileages, and it's interpreting this data and looking at the action plan accordingly. On the right hand side, we've got an example of where the data is showing we should go in to do deep retrofit on domestic properties and look at, for instance, concentrating on areas that are off gas grid as an example. So what I wanted to do, quickly sharing this data with you, is show that we've got an overarching vision with an underpinning local area action plan, and on that basis the regions are in a strong position to get on with large-scale delivery. So that was my quick input. I'm going to hand back to Rhodri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane, for that overview of the process and how particularly fit with power, heat and transport. So I'd like to introduce next speaker, which is Robert O'Dwyer, who's Head of Infrastructure at Cardiff Capital Region, to talk a little bit about what the South East region are doing. Robert, over to you.
Thanks, Rhodri. I'm just going to share my slides, so if you could just give me the nod that they've come up okay before I get cracking.
I will let you know, Robert. I think the cogs are working.
Yeah, it takes a while.
There you go, Robert. Thanks very much.
Okay, just putting it on presentation. Great. Okay, thanks everybody. Good to be invited here this afternoon. Rob O'Dwyer from Cardiff City Region, Head of Infrastructure. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown this afternoon on a few issues that pertain to Cardiff City Region in particular. A bit of an overview of the City Region for those who aren't familiar, details of our energy vision, the work we've been doing to date, plans for the future, and details of a business coalition idea that we'd like to run by you. So Cardiff Capital Region, for those who are not familiar, it's in the southeast corner of Wales, represented by the 10 local authorities, as you can see on the map there. Population of 1.6 million, 45 minutes from Cardiff. That's half the population of Wales, and they represent 55% of Wales' total economic output. Very high levels of talent and skilled workforce, high quality of life generally within the region, and very low operating costs. So it's a very good area for inward investment. And for the past 10 years, we've made a considerable amount of investment within CCR. The diagram there gives you an indication of what we've invested in different sectors right across the region. A few of the key areas are set out on the right. So we've got our Metro Plus programme, £30 million, Homes for the Region, 45, strategic premises at 50. We've launched our Challenge Fund and our Infuse public sector programme. It's a 16 million programme. And of course, we've got various innovation investments such as Creo Medical, Farm Intelligence at World, the Foundry, and our first investment, in fact, was the Foundry, and also CS Connected, which has come off the back of that. And then from a skills perspective, we've got our graduate programme. In terms of targets and what drives Cardiff City Region, we've got a £495 million budget with the objective of delivering 25,000 jobs, £4 billion worth of leverage, and 5% enhancement to GVA. As you can see from the figures there, we're doing pretty well in terms of progress against current commitments and the pipeline. I should point out the targets are based around 1.3 billion, but the actuals are based around 495 million. That accounts for the 800 million that's ring fenced for the Metro proposal. And the reason we haven't got any GVA figures in there at the moment is that they're currently being calculated by KPMG. So from an energy perspective, back in 2019, all 10 authorities within the region, off the back of their own individual climate emergency declarations, declared their vision, which was to create the conditions for a shift to a carbon neutral economy and society in CCR, growing our regional income whilst maintaining guardianship of our environment through a laser focus on clean growth. Clearly, you can tell from the vision that the emphasis is around decarbonisation, but there's also a very strong focus on the opportunities for economic growth off the back of that decarbonisation, as you would expect from a city deal. This page here very usefully distills the 90-page strategy into one simple page. The strategy includes a whole bunch of baseline information that was used to calculate the recommendations for our strategy. Sorry, I've just lost my presentation, just a moment. We've got, we consume 36% of total energy within the region. We host 22% of Wales' renewable energy capacity. 90% of homes are connected to the gas grid, and only 0.2% of those homes are fed by biomass boilers. So in essence, there's a huge amount of work to do there in terms of delivering our strategy. We estimate that we need to achieve a 55% reduction by 2035 in order to meet our targets for net zero by 2050. I mean, that clearly comes with a huge price tag, and we currently calculate that to be £8.6 billion. 3.6 of that is in addition to business as usual. So if we continue with the forecast and the trend that we set before COVID, we're looking at roughly an extra £3 billion worth of investment. Obviously, if we manage to do it, we've got potential for creation of a huge amount of jobs in excess of 70,000 and over £7 billion worth of GVA. A few highlights that we can take out of the strategy with regards to the energy visioning outcomes. From a domestic heat point of view, we need to increase the amount of homes on low carbon heating from 6%, which was the baseline figure in 2017, through to 27% in 2035. Road transport, we need a 64% increase by 2035 of electric vehicles. We need an increase from 0.7 gigawatts to 1.6 of renewable electricity in the region. And from a commercial and industrial perspective, we need to see a -6% reduction in energy demand if we're to meet our targets going forward. And from an energy efficiency perspective, we need to bring the number of houses currently within band E, F and G down from 161,000 to 7,000. So a huge amount of work to be done across the region. That's of course no different to the other areas across Wales, but I thought I'd put this diagram up just to show you the difference between Cardiff, North Wales and Mid Wales. Mid Wales, as you might expect, has got quite an emphasis on domestic, Cardiff Capital Region, much more of a focus in terms of transport. So that equates to around 60% reduction within CCR, which is what you'd expect, I guess, from our proximity to the M4. The next diagram gives you a little bit of an indication of how that translates all the way down to 2050. And I think the graph demonstrates, you know, there's clearly a lot to be done, but, you know, that line is only going to get steeper. The further we advance from 2017, which was when the baseline data was put together, we're probably looking at a much steeper incline to deliver what we set out to achieve by 2050. So that's all the work that we put together with regards our strategy and a very highlighted version of it. When we finished that exercise, we decided to set some criteria for what would deem to be a successful project and series of investments and interventions going forward. So we selected these particular critical success criteria, as you'd expect. The usual ones are there: strategic fit, deliverability, economic outcomes, environmental benefits, and value for money. All those key criteria were agreed with our CCR Energy Steering Group and the WGES. And obviously we've included, because we want to get scale up and transformational shift, we've included a paradigm shift criteria as well, to make sure that we've got the opportunity to really make a lasting transformational change with any of the interventions that we manage to invest in. So where are CCR now, and what are we preparing to do for Net Zero at the moment? I'll just take you through a few of our key opportunities that we're currently exploring. Obviously, local area energy planning is a focus at the moment of Welsh Government. They committed to provide an LAEP for the region by the end of 2023-24. That builds upon the work already undertaken by the regions across Wales, particularly around the energy strategies and the energy visioning. But the idea behind doing it regionally is that we think there's probably some economies of scale, some benefits to be achieved by doing it once rather than 8 times. I should stress it's 8 times because Bridgend and Newport have already undertaken their local area energy plans. So we'd be picking up from where they finished and doing a further plan times 8, but obviously cutting down on some of the work for the remaining local authorities. So we're in the process of appointing a technical advisor at the moment. Procurement has been completed. That technical advisor will work with the lead contractor, with Cardiff Capital Region, and in turn with the local authorities. And that's a 2-year programme that we're looking to put together in the next couple of months. Our challenge programme that I mentioned on the first couple of slides is a £10 million investment coupled with our sister programme, which is an Infuse public sector testbed programme. And the focus around that is dealing with local wealth building opportunity and solving societal problems that cut right across each of the local authorities. The box on the right there has identified the 3 areas that we're intent on targeting first. And the first of those that we've already started is accelerating decarbonisation. So we've had 3 cohorts that are running at the moment through our Infuse programme. That learning and that testing of the societal problems is then going into our challenge fund process. And at the moment, we've got 4 challenges running around fleet. The reason we started with fleet, as you can see from this particular slide, we've got a massive core requirement for grey fleet in the region, over 4,000 vehicles, and the grey fleet is over 11,000 vehicles. So we thought this was a good place for us to start our decarbonisation journey on the Challenge Fund. So what we've done with various local authority sponsors across the region is designate responsibility for one of these 4 challenges. So Merthyr County Council have decided to pick up on-site renewable energy for EV fleet charging at council depots. Monmouthshire County Council are picking up 2 challenges: digital twins for management of large-scale renewable energy, and zero-emission auxiliary energy supplies for utility and community vehicles. Cyfle County Council are the 4th authority that have volunteered to provide sponsorship, and that's optimising vehicles and charging infrastructure for council fleet. So all of those challenges are currently underway, and the hope is that the solutions that come about can be scaled up to be deployed right across the region. Our ULEV delivery programme is progressing at speed. Provision of taxi infrastructure, 34 chargers at 31 sites to date. Provision of our taxis Try Before You Buy scheme is now underway, 3-year pilot scheme. 44 wheelchair accessible electric vehicles have been provided under that scheme. We've had provision of a public use charging infrastructure commission. That contract was awarded for 640 chargers at 159 sites. So as you can see from our programme, there's a huge amount to be done there, but we're actually making big strides in terms of getting that infrastructure rolled out right across the region. Our domestic retrofit programme is likely to be one of the biggest within our whole energy programme for the next few years. Where we've started with that is to understand the potential behind the EcoFlex 4 opportunity. For those who are not aware, the EcoFlex scheme provides a obligation on the big 6 energy providers to target funding, 600 million last year, 1 billion for this coming year, at certain properties that would benefit from retrofit investment above others. So what we've done as a region, we've got regional cabinet approval to go ahead with a joint scaled up approach. That was approved on the 29th of November by our regional cabinet. So that'll comprise us coming up with a joint statement of intent that allows us to go out to the big 6 energy companies and roll out the red carpet and trying to fast track some of that obligation. The scope of the regional delivery model is also being worked up, because clearly with a commitment of this nature, we're going to have a resource to manage this type of function. And what we hope is that we'll build a model, if you like, for retrofit over the next 10 years, way beyond the Eco and the EcoFlex obligation, and create those lasting partnerships that we can use for the next 10 years. We've also committed to join in Race to Zero, and one of the commitments with regards Race to Zero is to join the Carbon Disclosure Programme. So we're underway with that at the moment. It's a free of charge service. Nearly 1/5 of the global greenhouse emissions is reported through that scheme. 8,000 organisations to date and rising rapidly. So there is a little indication of our programme. Hopefully we'll submit our data by July 2022. And I just thought I'd give you a quick rundown of a big investment for Cardiff City Region, which we're just in the process of completing on. That's the strategic site acquisition at Aberthaw Power Station. You can see there what Aberthaw currently looks like, and an indication below of what we're trying to turn it into, which is essentially taking advantage of the significant unique selling points of Aberthaw, and that's the 2 grid connections and the national and the rail connection, to establish a green energy park. This will tie in nicely with our themes around decarbonisation, maximising our opportunities around economy for sectors and ecosystems, hopefully provide high value jobs and education opportunity, and provide an opportunity for data sovereignty with a digital gigacentre incorporated within our master plan. The site's in a fantastic area, as I'm sure most of you are aware. It's in the St Athan and Cardiff Airport Enterprise Zone. That particular zone is one of only a handful in the UK that's capable of accommodating large battery production. So in terms of the proximity to Aberthaw Power Station, there's a huge potential for green energy to provide that power to that data gigacentre and battery storage. And the site's grid connection, of course, provides a huge opportunity for all manner of green energy projects. The site will include a variety of different opportunities that we're currently working at within our master plan, a zero carbon cluster, battery storage, as I mentioned previously, zero carbon data centre, a green energy innovation centre promoting innovation and knowledge right across the community and across business, a solar park, a biodiverse ecology park with potential to deliver an outreach centre. That's probably one of our more long-term ambitions. And of course, given the fact of the proximity to the Severn Estuary, there's an opportunity here for tidal lagoon power as well, which we've put an expression of interest into Welsh Government for. Why would CCR get involved in this? Well, clearly it ticks all the boxes from our perspective in terms of our climate crisis, decarbonisation, delivering our targets for 2050, building that low carbon economy within Wales. And of course, this won't come without a considerable opportunity to leverage in private sector investment, which is going to be key if we're going to meet that 3 billion price tag that I mentioned previously. So in conclusion, it's an ambitious project, but it's very grounded, and it's a timely project for CCR in terms of demonstrating leadership with regards to our climate reduction commitments, which has been well publicised across the region by all 10 authorities within Cardiff Capital Region. It's got the potential to create 5,000 jobs and a huge amount of training opportunity. It can contribute to our energy security and resilience, which is clearly key at the moment in terms of world affairs. And it will be a catalyst for the region taking advantage of the emerging green economy, which is coming off the back of all the funding that is available to private sector partners at the moment. And it's the sort of project that is what Cardiff City Region needs to get into, particularly as it merges or morphs into a Cardiff City Capital Region rather than a Cardiff City Region. So we're currently going through the process of CJC, Corporate Joint Committee, which is the mechanism that we're using to provide optimal delivery for what comes next after a city deal. It moves us from a single funding programme that we exist in at the moment to a potential for funding a wide range of different programmes, including energy. It's got many challenges, obviously, given the way that funding is being spread across Wales and across the UK at the moment. But it's about doing the right things and supporting our civic virtue. So it's something that we've embarked on with a lot of rigour at the moment. It's taken up a huge amount of resource. We're currently in a temporary status before we lift and shift permanently in September. What future opportunities are there to look at for Cardiff City Region? Skills, clearly a huge problem that we're looking to address with the Regional Skills Partnership. If we're going to invest such a large amount of money in our decarbonisation portfolio, it's going to provide a lot of jobs. We're going to have to provide a lot of skills to fill those jobs. Building resources and capability. This programme of this nature won't look after itself, so we're looking to build an energy agency off the back of the demand. Once the programme gets rolling, we'll start to work that up with Welsh Government and other partners. A smart regions operations centre. Those familiar with local authorities will realise that we're awash with data. Much of it isn't used effectively to inform investment opportunity and really measure the impact of our investments. So that's something we're focusing on at the moment. Culture and behaviour is where it all stems from. A small amount of work has been done on that at the moment, but it's something we really need to get stuck into to be able to reinforce all of these interventions that we're bringing into our portfolio. A digital twin around air quality, that's something we're working at with academic partners within Flexis. So that's another thing that we're looking to try and do over the next 12 months or so, is develop that academic partnership with Swansea and Cardiff University. Floating offshore wind provides a huge opportunity for the region. South East Wales may not benefit from the primary Port Talbot opportunities around that offshore wind, but it can certainly benefit from the supply chain benefits. So that's something we're looking to explore with a study of current capacity and inward investment opportunity that could fulfil that demand over the next 5 years or so. Tidal, as I mentioned earlier, we've got an expression of interest into Welsh Government. Green funds, we're looking to establish a CCR Strategic Premises Fund and a Housing Viability Gap Fund. Green element at the moment that doesn't include itself in those current funds, but we're looking to attach a green element to that. Data-driven decarbonisation and intelligent retrofit, we're looking at that with the Active Building Centre. Domestic new build to avoid retrofit, and farm to fork is something that MCC and Cardiff County Council are currently looking at with regards shortening the supply chain of the procurement process involved in bringing food from the farm to the fork and being available for public procurement. Procurement generally, the LA third-party spend is huge, as you can imagine, so that's something we're looking to get stuck into. And finally, business coalition, and this is where I want to spend the last couple of minutes, if I may, just pushing an idea past you that may be of interest. Clearly, climate change brings all sorts of risks to businesses across the region. The weather, the events, the conflict provides all sorts of supply shortages, including power. So what are we going to do about that? You know, the transition, chances are the transition from a carbon environment to a decarbonised environment will mean that society may no longer want products and skills that currently you may be providing. Large public sector clients may look to change their procurement processes and actions as part of their procurement process, and that will give increased business costs and probably a reduction in potential supply opportunity to those councils. Of course, you've got increased liabilities as well, financial penalties for emissions, poor air quality and poor recycling, all are going to provide opportunities for penalties to be enforced on businesses. So clearly there's a demand for some form of change from a business perspective. And taking action on climate change is something that many businesses are already fully familiar with. Energy efficiencies around cost reductions, asset values, resource productivity. Many companies are actually doing this at the moment, but I think it's safe to say that not every business is in this space sufficiently. So what we've been thinking may be an idea is that we form a collaboration, a business collaboration, for all of the local businesses around the region to come together across different sectors as well, meet with third sector, local authorities, and provide that gap to the knowledge deficit that exists at the moment. This is not a new initiative. It's been done in Manchester, Leeds, Yorkshire, Edinburgh and Belfast. So it's something we think we can probably bring about in the Cardiff City region. I think I'm just about to run out of time, so I won't go into any further details on that, but really I would like to get some feedback either directly within the chat afterwards or possibly directly with myself as to whether businesses think this is a good opportunity to be part of a coalition, what advantages they could perceive, and whether we think it's worth the effort. Thanks very much, Rodri, and back to you.
Thanks very much, Rob. A really comprehensive overview of the actions that are taking place within the 10 authorities of the Cardiff Capital Region. And thank you for mentioning the chat function. If you want to pose any questions, particularly Rob's keen to hear around your thoughts on a climate coalition, please use the chat bar on your side. So I promised you all a bit of an overview from the FSB. So I'd like to introduce Rob Bassini from the FSB to give you their perspective. Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Rodri. I think my camera is blocked by something your end at the moment. Am I correct to say that? I don't seem to have an option to put my camera on.
Okay, I'm going to reach into the depths of those people that are supporting the operations and see if they can.
Oh, hang on. There we go. Let's have a try.
There we go.
There we go. Done.
Thank you, Cara, in the background.
Thank you, Rodri, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I've been asked to give a perspective from a small business point of view in terms of what's happening in this journey towards net zero for them, and I thought it would be perhaps logical if I start with giving a bit of context, what's happening for smaller businesses in the wider business landscape, because obviously the journey to net zero doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's lots of other stuff going on at the moment. I thought then it would be logical if I touch on a couple of the key challenges that small businesses are facing, and I thought it would be logical if we finish by highlighting some key actions that we feel are required on the part of different groups. So in terms of the range of well-publicised pressures that small businesses are facing at the moment, recruitment, retention of staff, higher staff costs, absenteeism of staff at the moment, still with COVID. Absenteeism presents pressures in itself. Higher costs of transport has been well publicised recently. Energy costs and fuel costs right at the moment, again, put financial pressures on businesses. The list could go on. I could talk about extra debt that businesses are carrying as a result of COVID. extra costs of exporting and importing, the impact of global events. What's going on in the Ukraine at the moment is obviously having a number of impacts on small businesses, aside from the other huge impacts, obviously, on so many people in Ukraine. So there are these pressures which really are 5 years ago, 4 years ago, these pressures weren't as acute as they are right now, and they're really playing a part, working together. The cumulative impact of all of these pressures is having a massive impact for lots of businesses. It's not obviously a one-size-fits-all for small businesses. Some businesses are doing okay, but unfortunately for many businesses, they are trying to move towards net zero against this backdrop of these extra pressures that I've just outlined. We know that small businesses, the vast majority of small businesses, really want to play their part and to do the right thing. We also know that some of those challenges that I mentioned that I would talk about also play a part. And in terms of some of those challenges, the costs of implementing change and sometimes the perceived costs of implementing change present barriers. I've just talked about those financial pressures, but also the costs of, for example, electric vehicles can be perceived as prohibitive at the moment. Accessing clear, simple to understand information is an issue for many businesses. And this is a really interesting point. There's some great advice which is provided by some agencies, some quite simple advice. Right at the other end of the scale, there's some quite complex consultancy advice, but there's a bit of a gap in the middle, it seems to us. And I'm basing that on what a number of businesses have actually told us. So being able to access clear and simple to understand information is still an issue for a number of businesses. Ensuring a green supply chain for many is a real challenge at the moment, particularly right now when lots of businesses are actually having difficulties just getting their hands on any kind of supplies to keep them operating. So ensuring a green supply chain is a challenge for many. And accurately measuring small businesses' impact is another challenge. Just yesterday, somebody was explaining to me the subtleties of carbon offsetting, and even in around something which one would think is sort of a really positive thing, there can be some negatives around that. The situation might not be clear-cut, and for small businesses to accurately measure their impact sometimes is a challenge in itself. For them to address, for them to assess what they need to improve and make a plan to improve them. Insufficient infrastructure can be an issue, and unreliable and costly public transport can be issues where businesses are looking to change, let's say, transport habits. It can be difficult to do where infrastructure is lacking and public transport maybe doesn't do what businesses need them to do. So lots of challenges for small businesses to overcome. We know that the vast majority of businesses, depending on what stats we look at, 95, 98% of businesses are small and micro. So it's obviously vital that these businesses are brought on this journey. We also know that small and micro businesses employ over 60% of those employed in the private sector in the UK and in Wales. So it's absolutely vital that small businesses become and remain sustainable as we move forward. Now, in terms of some of the actions that we feel are needed, I've broken this down into actions that businesses themselves need to take, actions that Welsh Government need to take, actions that organisations like FSB need to take, and then we'll talk about a few other organisations. We've got a few people in the room today, people like Cardiff Capital Region, Swansea Bay City Deal, and so on. So in terms of businesses themselves, we know that businesses are actually already doing quite a lot. I won't just throw statistics at you, but just to give a flavour, 47% of businesses, according to one of our UK-wide surveys, at the moment are avoiding plastics where possible, just to give a flavour. So that's almost half of businesses who've actually proactively started to avoid plastics where possible. That's just one random example. But some key areas for businesses to focus on: addressing transport and commuting to and from work, how staff get to and from work, how businesses deliver and structure their deliveries. The whole area of transport and commuting is key. Recycling and waste is obviously another area that businesses need to focus on. Looking at emissions. Education is a key part in terms of educating customers, in terms of educating staff and training. That's a key focus. I've just talked about understanding impacts, and businesses need to find a way to understand their impacts. They need to consider energy efficiency improvements where possible. They need to look at properties, their property and premises, and what practical changes can be made easily. And I think taking some small feedback we've had from small businesses is just by taking small steps at the start, that gets the ball rolling and starts to get some momentum, staff get motivated, and bigger changes become possible then. And preparing for changes to regulation. So planning is a key element for small businesses themselves as well. In terms of Welsh Government and actions that Welsh Government should be taking, we think that there should be a dedicated advice line where clear guidance and advice is provided to small businesses. Funding support should be available on key areas such as electric vehicles. That funding, by the way, should be practical and relevant to small businesses. One business was telling us a couple of days ago that they looked at a pot of funding through BEIS, a central UK pot, and the practicalities of accessing this fund just didn't work for the small business. So the funding needs to be relevant to and practical for small businesses to access. There needs to be viable transport alternatives provided, and infrastructure needs to be improved and adapted, for example, electric vehicles and charging points. We also feel the Welsh Government could adopt a constructive approach and a creative approach to utilising incentives around taxation. So there could be some tax breaks which are given to small businesses to allow them to invest in energy efficient capital, for example. So a longer term strategy for transition to electric vehicles we think is needed, and clean air frameworks. Clearly, lots of positives. They need to be, the systems around clean air frameworks need to be practical and work for small businesses and micro businesses as well. In terms of organisations like ourselves, the Federation of Small Businesses, we need to keep on campaigning and lobbying. We've done a number of reports, held a number of conferences recently. We need to keep up that pressure on various groups, and we also need to play our part in communicating clear guidance and advice. I mentioned about other sorts of stakeholders who are in the room today. We've got, like I say, CCR, we've got Swansea Bay City deal. I don't know whether anybody's here from the Mid Wales growth deal, but it's vital that small businesses are kept at the heart of the plans of these kind of initiatives. Small business, the activity needs to be relevant to small businesses and practical for them to assess. Funding support where appropriate needs to be, as I've mentioned, practical and relevant to small businesses. To summarise then, I hope that I've given, I think I'm just about on time. I hope I've given a flavour of the kind of sea in which small businesses are operating at the moment, the challenges that they're facing around the journey to net zero, and some of those key steps that businesses themselves, Welsh Government, UK Government, organisations like ours, need to be taking to support businesses on this journey. So I hope that does give a flavour. Rodri, back to you.
Thanks very much, Rob, for articulating the views of the FSB. And two things that I particularly heard in there is about relevant and practical for small businesses to be able to play their part in the decarbonisation journey. So thanks very much, Rob. So now takes us to one of the last presenters. That's by no means least, I should say. So Stephen Jones from Pembrokeshire Council, who's taking the lead on the regional energy strategy for South West Wales. So Stephen, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks very much. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much, Rodri, and thanks to Jane and to Robert and to Rob as well for sharing their work and some of the exciting opportunities clearly around in the Cardiff Capital Region and the views of the small businesses as well. It's going to be a hard presentation to follow, I think. Good afternoon, everybody. My name, as you see, is Stephen Jones. My day job is Director of Community Services down here in Pembrokeshire. But for the last 18 months, I've chaired the core group that has overseen the development of the South West Wales Regional Energy Strategy. Worth stressing that whilst the 4 South West local authorities have promoted and coordinated this work, the energy strategy is a strategy for the region, not a strategy for the local authorities or indeed the public sector. You're possibly aware that the public sector accounts for only about 1% of total emissions in Wales. So in one sense, we're a pretty small player. That said, local authorities have a very important leadership and placemaking role. I am pleased to confirm that all 4 councils in South West Wales have recently considered supported, adopted the Southwest Energy Strategy, and the Southwest Corporate Joint Committee approved the strategy at its meeting on the 15th of March. So this slide provides a little bit of context. I'm sure you'll recognise the maps, the plans and the logos. The Southwest Wales Energy Strategy, we think, is an important piece in the SWIC clean growth jigsaw. As Chris Williams said in his recent podcast interview with former First Minister Carwyn Jones, access to low carbon power, to hydrogen and to carbon capture and storage is critical to future industrial development and the sustainability of over 100,000 manufacturing jobs in South Wales. The Regional Energy Strategy isn't a silver bullet, but it does offer a potential pathway to put Southwest Wales on track to achieve a net zero energy system by 2050. And in doing so, it raises the prospect of creating thousands of new skilled jobs with an associated increase in GVA of 1.6 billion. And this isn't all about theoretical modelling. In my part of the region, in Pembrokeshire, we're already seeing and feeling the benefit of new investment and job creation as part of the Pembroke Dock Marine Swansea Bay City Deal project that's supporting infrastructure, research and testing facilities to transition Milford Haven towards a marine renewable energy future, with very significant opportunities for floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea. And I think the deep water at Port Talbot provides the potential for further investment and scale, and perhaps the opportunity for a Southwest free port that could genuinely provide additional stimulus to deal with the real surge in activity, and I quote, that was reported at the Marine Energy Wales conference in North Wales last week. And indeed across the Southwest and across key sectors such as housing, commercial, industrial and transportation, there are a broad range of opportunities, low carbon projects and interventions that are contributing to the region's new economic plan, and specifically the mission within the plan to promote Southwest Wales as the UK leader in renewable energy and the development of a net zero economy. So the Southwest Wales Energy Strategy isn't framed in terms of old world environment versus economy arguments. Rather, it recognises that clean energy is the foundation stone of good growth. Could just ask for the slide to be moved on, please. Thank you. That said, the Regional Energy Strategy underlines the scale of the challenge too. Southwest Wales consumes currently around 36% of all the energy consumed in Wales, significantly more than the 22% of the population that lives in the Southwest. In part, this is due to the concentration of some very large industrial sites within the region. And in that context, and as Jane mentioned, it's very welcome news that Vaughan Gething announced the creation of a new body, the Net Zero Industry Wales, during his visit to Tata Steel yesterday, and with a particular focus on companies along the M4 corridor. Many, or indeed most, of those industrial sites are already committed to this agenda and benefiting from some of the academic excellence that exists in our region's universities. Indeed, across the Southwest and across communities, the public sector and the private sector, there are thousands, literally, of initiatives that are contributing to the net zero challenge. But we need to do more. We know from our baseline assessment that about 30,000 homes are currently fueled by oil or LPG, coal or other solid fuels, and less than 1% of homes in the region have a heat pump or a biomass boiler. In terms of transport, the region currently has half the percentage number of electric cars as opposed to the UK average. Whilst there has been progress, it's been incremental rather than transformational. The total energy consumption across the region did reduce by 26% between 2005 and 2017. But to get to net zero by 2050, the South West needs to reduce emissions from its energy system by 55% by 2035. Business as usual isn't an option, and the current trajectory will leave us well short. So what's to be done? Well, the regional energy strategy sets out a clear vision. You can see this plan on a page slide, and a set of priorities to address the scale of the challenge. The plan is grounded in detailed modelling, and I'm grateful to colleagues in the Welsh Government Energy Service who have quarried and crunched the data. Across the 4 planned themed areas of domestic, commercial, industrial, road transport and renewable generation, there are some pretty stretching targets. As you can see, 58% reduction in domestic heat and emissions, power emissions, a 56% reduction in commercial and industrial emissions, that excludes the large industry users, and a 51% reduction in road transport emissions. We know the pathways to net zero are not prescriptive. We know that innovation and research will play a crucial part, and we need industry and academia to build on the great work that's already happening in the Southwest. And there'll be new opportunities across all sectors in the years ahead. And on the supply side, the Southwest has the natural and infrastructure advantages, be that deep water or grid connections and pipelines, to generate a substantial contribution to the country's renewable energy needs and security. From gigawatts of floating wind in the Celtic Sea to hydrogen, and across to the nascent Blue Eden Lagoon opportunity in Swansea Bay. When Wales's largest generator, RWE, commits to making Pembroke its centre for net zero, and when global companies like Total and EDF commit investment in the Celtic Sea, you know that the needle is moving. And so there's a huge amount to go at here, and I presume that the Prime Minister's imminent announcement on a new energy plan will provide a further stimulus to this activity. Next slide, please. Thank you. But progress is already underway, and I just want to highlight 3 key projects that the Southwest are progressing through the Swansea Bay City Deal programme. These 3 projects are part of a suite of 9 programmes that have all now been signed off by UK and Welsh Government and are in various stages of delivery. The first I've already mentioned is the creation of a world-leading marine energy offer at the Port of Pembroke in Milford Haven, with the support of the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult and the Port of Milford Haven and other partners. The investment in facilities and technology transfer is designed to de-risk the whole development process in the marine renewable sector. Next slide, please. And at the other end of the region, the supporting innovation and carbon growth around the Port Talbot enterprise zone provides an integrated suite of projects that will help transform steel and metal production through research and development and the infrastructure necessary to assist new startup and growth enterprises. And the next slide, please. And the third example is a regional project which is being led by Neath Port Talbot Council, but involves all 4 local authorities, registered social landlords and private sector housing developers. The project focuses on the domestic property market and the huge technology and supply chain opportunities for carbon reductions in existing housing stock and across new developments as well. These 3 projects are all contributing to the pathway that will put South West Wales on track to achieve a net energy system by 2050. But we need to do more, and crucially, we need to ensure that business is seen as part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. Next slide, please. So where are we now? Well, it's been sleeves rolled up time, and we've been very much in the action planning phase, working through the 4 themed areas outlined in the strategy. We're working collectively with the support of the Welsh Government Energy Service to identify the barriers and the challenges and the actions needed to address them. Specifically in terms of the key issues facing the commercial and industrial theme, these are around energy efficiency, around supply chain and economic development opportunities, around energy generation and its use, and around infrastructure and investment. And the next slide, please. And then finally, in terms of our particular focus, it's on developing the evidence base to prioritise our actions, on building the regional competence and the capacity, on putting in place the governance to deliver actions across all sectors, and to focus on that sweet spot that maximises opportunities for enterprise and economic growth in the region as part of a broader South Wales approach. Thank you very much, Rodri. That's it from me. Back to you.
Stephen, thank you very much for that overview for the activities that are happening in the South Wales West. It's clear there's a lot of activity going on across South Wales at the national, regional, and now at the local level. But of course, all those land in a place, very aware of that. So thank you all to the presentators today for their presentations. Take a slightly different tack now. I'm going to introduce Jane back, who's going to do a bit of a poll for you, for those of you that are attending today. And then once we've completed that, we're going to open up the floor for questions and answers. There are some questions, some very specific questions in the chat room, but please feel free to add to those, and I'll take the opportunity to go through them once Jane has taken you through the poll. So Jane, over to you. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you, Rodri. So this is a chance for a bit of audience participation. We're hoping the technology is going to work. So it's only a few questions, but it might help us in terms of what support we can give you following this afternoon. So if I can have the first question.
Yeah, I'll just load that for you now, Jane.
Cara, thank you. So with these questions, you'll get a few moments to select an answer. There you go. So I think with your mouse, you can just click on the right answer. So if you don't mind doing that, and I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Then obviously click the submit button.
So Jane, just to confirm, that is on the screen.
Brilliant. Has anyone had a go at? Can we click? Is that? So Cara, I can't see the answers. So are people
Yes.
clicking?
They
Yeah.
are, yeah. So we're up to
Lovely.
26 responses at the moment. So I'll wait
Oh,
until it
marvellous.
creeps up a little bit more.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. So closing seconds on that one. So our next question, please. And so now we're interested in whether you've got a carbon management plan. So it could be honest, no. You might have something in preparation. Yes, you've definitely got something, and by yes we mean it's signed off by your management or chief exec. And the other bit of detail is, will that get you to net zero by 2050? So Cara, I can't see the results, but can the audience see the results?
I don't know that they can, no. I think it's just because I've created the Teams link for the event today. I think it's just myself. Unless anybody can see it, then please do let us know.
So Cara, no, that we can't see those. There is a drop-down bar for view results in polls, but I can't see those yet.
Okay, no problem. They will be available after the session. I can share them with you, Jane, or if you did want me to give you a percentage as we go along, just let me know when I can do that.
You can see the result, can you?
I've got a little pop-up box on my screen, yeah.
Well, lovely, Cara, actually, because I think people might be interested. Oh, some people can see them, some cannot.
Okay, interesting.
Jane, as soon as you respond, it then gives you the summary. So you can see how many people and what percentage in each question. So again, yeah, so you can see the result.
Right. So thank you for that, whoever said that. Cara, can you just shout out how many yeses, perhaps as combined total, how many yeses have we got to people having carbon management plans?
Yeah, so we've got 44% of yes, we've got 16% yes, and it will get to us get to net zero by 2050. We've got 4% at no and 36% in preparation.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a good spread. Okay, thank you. So our next question, don't worry, there aren't any more, but we just thought this was a handy finger in the air. So people might have to tab down to see the options for this. So do you operate in a joint setting where, say, a business park or an industrial centre, where you could operate, if we were going to introduce something like bulk purchase of, say, solar panels or joint power purchasing agreements, or even perhaps look at support with electric vehicle charging infrastructure and things like solar carports, do you operate in a setting where it would make sense to collaborate on that kind of thing? And then if any of these questions aren't quite giving you the answer that you want, please use the chat function. So I'll give you a few seconds on that one.
So we've got 24 responses in. We've got 64% at yes, 20% at no, and 16 at maybe.
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, then what we might do after this is ask if people are interested, then perhaps let us know if this is something you'd like to pursue. So the next question, please, Cara, is actually, you can tick as many as you like, because if these initiatives are of interest, then please let us know. And if there's something that isn't on that list that you like that you want to propose yourselves, then please pop it in the chat. Because obviously, as a region across the south, we're looking essentially at deep retrofit to save money and save carbon on energy efficiency and fuel switching. So they're the two obviously priority areas, and these are ways that this could happen. Okay, Cara, how are we looking on responses?
So it's averaging out actually. So we've got bulk purchase of solar panels at 20%, okay. Joint power purchase arrangements 13, combined fuel switching at 20, combined approaches to energy efficiency at 28, and then joint approaches to electric vehicles and charging infrastructure at 20%.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. And our next question. And I think this is our so we've just got 2 more questions now. So this one is about your electric vehicles transition, or perhaps you're transitioning to another fuel. So if you could let us know if you're transitioning all your vehicles to electric, and that's a no, a yes, and a wonderful yes of getting to the UK government's target of net zero by 2035.
Okay, so we've got some responses coming in, a few more to go. We've got 29% at no, 47% at yes, and 27% at yes, and we have a plan to be net zero by 2035.
Oh, well done. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so well done. We've obviously got some stellar performers, and then obviously an audience where perhaps we need to look at support. Thank you. Okay, so our last question. So when please answer this whether you're in the southeast or the southwest. Stephen has said he's happy to have the results. You heard Rob describe the possibility of launching a climate coalition pledge, where we're looking to encourage you to sign a pledge with a carbon reduction target of your choosing. So we're not insisting, but you'd be part of the family in signing up to say you'd reduce your emissions. And obviously with the coalition, we'd then look to set up a support network so that we'd share knowledge on how to achieve net zero. So we're interested in whether you'd want to sign a pledge like that. They've been hugely successful in places like Manchester and Leeds. Manchester, I think they managed to get 70 companies signing up, and that actually equated to 20% of the city's emissions. So obviously you can also then, by signing a pledge, start to push down your supply chain and encourage more people to sign. So Cara, how are we looking?
Yeah, so we've got 64% saying yes. Oh, it's just popped up to 67 actually. 67 at yes, 0 at no, which is great, and then 31 at maybe.
That's wonderful, thank you. Well, thank you all for your participation in that. That's given us really helpful intelligence there, and hopefully both growth deals will be interested in taking away the results with that. Cara, did you say there might be a way of sharing the results?
Yes, I'm going to check after the session is finished, and I should be able to collate the information there, and then we can hopefully share that with all the attendees.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much. I'll hand back to Rodri. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. It's always very beneficial to have a bit of audience participation because some of these events can be quite dry, can't they? So thank you very much for that. Really good to see, and I think a pat on the back to those who are engaged in South Wales, to see so many people have carbon management plans either developed or in production. I think the figure was something around 80% from stakeholders that are attending here. So that's an excellent piece of news. Also, I think I was picking up some of the metrics around ULEVs, and certainly over half of those respondents saying that there is a transition to ULEVs. So clear there's a huge amount of work that's already ongoing within the region. So thanks for that. Really interesting format as well, Jane. So I think we'll pick those up at some of the stuff that we do more generally. So thanks for that. So just like to thank all the presenters today, and I'm going to open up for the last 10 minutes that we have or so that we have to questions. If anybody wants to pose a question themselves by putting their hand up, I shall try and find you. We have 2 questions not related to the poll. I think probably one's a shout out from Michael Nixon to talk to Robert Dwyer around fleet decarbonisation. So we'll make sure that that link's made, Michael. There's a question in the chat bar from John Barker in terms of PCAN. I think this is probably for you, Robert, as well, about digital approaches to connect and collaborate across sectors. Is that something that you feel you want to come back on?
Yeah, I'd probably come back separately on that one. If we've got the contact details, I'll make a separate call if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. That's really helpful. So I'm just going to pick up any further questions. So from Peter Austin, that's a name I recognise from Swansea Bay City Deal Partnership. Very much appreciate a strategic approach to building a green supply chain across the region, building an order book, and would help supply confidence. I think that's exactly one of the benefits of doing planning at a strategic level. So not only do you plan to understand what's going on within at a local level, you're able to plan the future for skills development, supply chain and partnership. And I'm sure that's something that will certainly come out of the local energy plans that are being devised as we speak. So thanks, Peter, for that question or comment. I'm just going to hold open for anybody else. Chris? Yeah, indeed. I think one of the things that is really difficult, thanks for your comment, Chris Williams, is understanding and mapping what's going on across the region. There is a huge amount of opportunity out there at, as I said, the national, regional and local level, an opportunity to utilise and exploit those for economic development as well as decarbonisation and resilience. So yeah, I think this is part of that process and part of the work that SWIC are doing and the capital regions are doing to pull those pieces of work together and lead on the coordination of activities and exploit the linkages between companies, institutions and organisations. So I'm really grateful for SWIC for hosting and making time for an event like this today. Okay. Are there any other further questions from any?
I'll just come in with a comment, Roger, if
sure, Robert.
That's okay. It's just really pleasing about the number who express an interest in a potential coalition. What we'll do from here is contact all parties on the call today, those who expressed an interest and those who didn't, with some further information, just explaining what we think we can do with a coalition, what the membership would look like, you know, what the obligations might be. It's really just a starter for 10, but it might instigate a more detailed conversation that we can perhaps just have specifically around that particular issue to flesh out whether there is a real opportunity. I think there probably is. You know, other regions around the country wouldn't have done it otherwise, but just to see what it could do for South East Wales. So we'll be back in touch on that. Okay, thanks, Robert. And Robert, Chris is putting a question in or a comment really in the chat box about what CCR may be doing, and I know that you will be doing, to focus on supporting in the valleys areas and particularly Cyfle areas. Anything that you can add? On that, Rob? It's a good question because you know, traditionally we've got some funds. I mentioned the Strategic Premises Fund and the Housing Viability Gap Fund, and a lot of the work that becomes readily accessible within the region naturally falls around that more commercially viable belt around the M4 corridor. But we're all about inclusive growth in CCR, as you would have seen from that map I showed on my first slide, which showed the interventions right across the region. So we've got to work hard to make sure that we're able to make the investments and in this case our carbon reduction plans work right across the region. So in terms of the green energy opportunities around sites and premises and housing, we're looking to blend a commercial approach with a potential grant opportunity. So we're looking to explore ways that we can supplement that core funding, which is a more commercial nature, and put some viability gap funding essentially in the mix as well. So early days in terms of trying to work out how that will work in practice. But just to say that we're conscious of the fact that sometimes the heads of the valleys or the Northern Valley regions need an extra little bit of impetus. Okay, thanks for that, Robert. That's really helpful. Okay, so colleagues, I'm just wondering about how people might get more engaged in the local action planning in each of the regions. Rob, for Cardiff Capital Region. I mean, you can contact me at any time to ask any questions about our plans and our aspirations for decarbonisation and how that works in conjunction with our investment portfolio. That's not a problem, but we'll put a call out as well as part of this business coalition to ask businesses and third sector partners to get involved essentially and contribute their ideas and opportunities, signpost us to funding, good practice, opportunities to enter our challenge fund or our other programs of investment. So we'll put the information either directly on our website or specifically for this particular audience. We'll circulate some notes with a request to come forward with ideas, and then we'll meet up and discuss afterwards.
Thanks, Rob. And Steve in the Southwest?
Thank you, Rodri. It would be easy to answer sort of ditto Robert, really, but there are some subtle differences, I guess, in terms of the way we're setting things up currently in the Southwest, working alongside the City Deal, but it's not actually being managed through the City Deal programme. So we need to ensure that we don't let anything slip through the gaps there. I'm confident we won't. There's a strong read across and integrated working across that programme of 9 projects that I mentioned. But in terms of moving forward and getting more engagement from businesses in the Southwest, then we have our action plan groups up and running. If businesses are keen to join those, then they can either contact myself directly or perhaps Brian at the Welsh Government Energy Service, who's facilitated a lot of this work for us, and I'm very grateful for that. But yes, the more we can socialise and broaden the level of input and engagement, that's got to be good for everybody. So happy to follow up any particular inquiries from companies, businesses in the Southwest.
Thanks, Stephen. That's really helpful. I think, that's one of the beauties of Wales, is that everybody is really quite well connected. So between individuals within the 2 capital regions, working on the regional footprint or on a local authority footprint, Welsh Government Energy Service, Brian, Jane and the team, and with SWIC themselves, there's a strong collaborative work. So I think any of those portals will provide a linkage into the work that's going to be taken forward in terms of local energy action planning. Certainly in the Southwest, that procurement for partners is about to get underway, and there'll be further details on how to get involved in the local energy planning at the ground level that will flow from that work. Okay, so I think certainly quite happy for people to contact me as well, and we can make sure that those linkages are made if they are not made directly. Okay, so I'm really grateful for everybody's attendance and time today. I hope that's given you an overview of the strategic nature of energy planning, but also how that is going to be delivered at a local level. Jane, it's been really great to have some feedback on the poll there, and as I said earlier, really good to see a lot of people have carbon management plans already underway, and I'm sure that WGES Energy Service and us all will help support that work should anybody need some help with best practice, etc. So just to say thank you to everybody who's participated today, you the audience for giving your time up to do that, and a bit of a shout out to SWIC for the range of activities that it's got going on for the rest of the week. I hope you're able to spare a bit of time to dial into some of those. A really exciting agenda in what is a really exciting agenda, and host an opportunity for us in South West Wales and South East Wales. So thank you, everybody. Really good to see some of you, and thank you very much. Some nice hands. Thank you very much. So I will wrap up there. Please feel free to get in contact if you've got any burning questions that you didn't manage to come up with in the very short time that we gave you to come up with them. So thank you all, everybody, and have a safe journey home, wherever you're moving from, landing to lounge, etc., or indeed from your work environment. So thanks very much. Thanks all, and thanks to everybody for organising. and facilitating today's event.